Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 1080 for the 7th of February. We're going to start off with Kursk because this is where the main focus is because of the Ukrainian counter offensive over in the southeast of Sudzha. There is new geolocations of Ukrainian infantry under artillery strike, and I did mention in the previous SITREP that this is important to establish that the Ukrainians are holding positions, so rather than just getting destroyed. So with this, we can confirm that Ukrainian counter-offensive is pretty successful. They managed to capture ground just off Ulanok, and this confirms the full capture of Kursk and Andriivka, because the Ukrainian defensive positions in these forest tree lines or forest entrance region would mean that they are holding positions, and these two village or town is now more secure. So this is a place where the Ukrainians landed troops and enter into the forest in various locations. So they are likely to hold some defense line. For now, it's unclear if the Russians would want to enter into the forest. Yeah. So let's see how this goes. Rumors from the pro-Ukrainian side say that the North Koreans are back. The second wave of North Korean soldiers. Although even the first wave, I find it very hard to fully establish, other than the two POWs that clearly speaks Korean. But no, I don't speak Korean, so I do not know if the accent is correct, if it's really a North Korean people. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there's definitely some North Korean elements in Kursk. However, it's unclear if they're actually in combat role, or it could be they're just there to do engineering work like building trenches and whatnot. But let's see. Maybe there will be more evidence coming out in the near future. So Ryba actually wrote quite a bit regarding this Ukrainian offensive, and they do acknowledge. So they wrote a lot, but generally they do share DPA's observation that there isn't any Russian forces defending the forward positions. So I see that the Kursk Counter2 and Andriivka doesn't seem to have Russian forces defending. This is evident by the quick advance by the Ukrainian forces into these forward positions, where I believe the Russian lines is actually at Ulanok. So this so basically Ryba does acknowledge this likely possibility that there is actually no Russian forces defending these forward positions. So according to their information, they say that there's practically no contingent of Russian armed forces, and so they say that the Ukrainian forces continue to move under the strike of UAV, and then the places are not controlled by anyone. And then the Ukrainians drove into Kharkov unnoticed, built a crossing across the Smetnitsa River, and yeah. So basically, they are unhappy. The Ryba, the pro-Russian source, is unhappy with the situation, saying that the command of one of the brigade at the location is to blame. Allegedly, someone was even removed there again, allegedly putting a candidate no better. I don't know. This translation is definitely broken. But probably meaning that there's some politics involved among the military there. So this caused this failure that allows the Ukrainian to recapture ground. Personally, I do not share this situation. I personally do feel that it is just a Russian way of fighting. Yeah, like if they realize that the Ukrainians are probably going to come, they will retreat to a certain line where they feel more comfortable, and they prepare UAVs. This is largely what they have done in the initial Kursk offensive as well. The Ukrainians started to blitz across Kursk, entering Sudzha, and try to storm as far as possible. But along the way, Ukrainian forces suffered a lot of casualties, and there is unusual amount of airstrike, helicopter strikes, and UAV strikes on Ukrainian forces. Unnatural, like for a place where you believe that they are not really putting forces much to defend the border. They have ridiculous amount of UAVs defending it. So I find that to be a strategy, a defensive strategy, to trade space for time and space for attack time. So So the Ukrainians can just keep driving. They didn't contact with anyone. Then they just keep getting destroyed by UAVs. That is something that we have already seen right at the beginning of the Kursk offensive. So then this is something that I also noticed for this offensive where, like I said, 2 kilometers, only the Ukrainians only travel around 2 kilometers and then they're starting to get struck by UAVs. Try driving 2 kilometers. It's actually not that far. You can actually drive 2 kilometers very quickly. So the Russians are definitely aware of them coming and they just prepared UAV and started striking all these vehicles. So so the intel is definitely there. The Russians know what they are doing. So that's what I think. But of course, you may feel that is very pro-Russia, then so be it. No, but that is just my observation of the way of how the Russians operate in Kursk. This is not applicable for other front line. In the other front line, the Russians doesn't seem to be using this strategy that much because in Kursk is less entrenched. In the very entrenched ground, losing ground can be very expensive for the Russians. So because taking it back might be very costly. So because of the defensive, the heavy entrenchment, whatnot, in Kursk is not that entrenched. But let's see how this goes. I think the Ukrainians want to stay in Kursk. The Russians also want the Ukrainians to stay in Kursk. That's what I feel. So over in the western flank, we have the usual. The strategic situation did not change. Russian forces attacked at Svetiklovo, Lebedevka, Nikorsky. Lognia was not mentioned. And over in the northern flank, we have fighting reported over at Novaya Sorokina, Nikolaevka, and Malaya Lognia. And if you have noticed, there seems to be lesser reports of fighting. Shelling reports also much reduced. Only Gogolevka was mentioned and Gocharovka. And Merne was mentioned over the eastern flank. So the lack of shelling reports does suggest two possible things. First thing, the Russians are now distracted by the Ukrainian offensive in the southwest of southeast of Sudzha, and they are putting all their resources to this, or that the build-up of the Ukrainian forces has been committed and they no longer need to attack the real position that much. That's also a possibility. But the fact that the frontline attacks is lesser, like for example, there's no Kositsa and no Cherkasskoye Poroshnye, might suggest that the Russians are now distracted into trying to defend. Like Martinovka was not also mentioned, so there was this redeployment of forces or concentration of attention towards the southeast of Sudzha, and whereas lack of shelling in the center, all this shelling did not happen, might suggest that there is no more Ukrainian forces gathering in this area here, as they already have moved out to attack the southeast. So that's just my feeling. Gogolevka still getting shelled because this is still the main entrance into Sudzha. This is still the main entrance in, so this shelling here is not surprising. So if that's the case, there's a possibility that in this forest is where the Ukrainians actually hide their troops initially, and then they actually drive down the roads to attack into towards Ulanok and Cherkasskoye Konopelka. Potentially there's also forces hiding in Sudzha and to the west of this, so this is another force that's driving through in the other direction. So this is my guess or analysis of what actually happened and why we are seeing all these shelling reports like Zaleshenka, Rubenskina. We have shelling reported at Pervy Knyazy. Pervy Knyazy. We have shelling reported at Kabakin, Zazulevka. So all this does make sense to me if the Ukrainian forces actually just head down in those directions. So tentatively, the Ukrainians did not go too far. The maximum distance at this moment for this offensive is around 5 kilometers. It's actually not bad. But they are unable to go further because Russian forces probably is defending at Ulanok, and they have landed forces to now try to siege Ulanok. So if Ulanok is less weakly defended, I think the Ukrainians will have gone further to blitz through for as far as they can, just like the initial Kursk offensive. But this did not work. So yeah, it is what it is. Russian forces was reportedly, according to Ryba, counter-attacking or shelling or fire attack against Ukrainian forces over at Fanasievka, whereas we have Deep State UA and Russian Defense Ministry mentioning about the Ukrainian counteroffensive, counteroffensive over Kursk So that's for the reporting. Ulano is under attack, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, and we have no fighting reported at Guevo and Krylovka, clearly showing that the Russians are distracted by the Ukrainian operations towards Ulano. So in a way, you can actually put it that this is actually a successful operation that distracts Russian forces from their offensive operation. So I will stand corrected. It's not a semi-success. It's actually a success for the Ukrainians. But of course, we do not know where's the core objective of this operation. But given that they are able to distract Russian forces from their usual operations and manage to capture ground, I would say this is a success. So that's all from the Kursk front. Over in the Kharkiv front, we do not have any reports other than in Chasiv, in Voschansk, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. There wouldn't be much Russian Defense Ministry report or any, because the Russian Defense Ministry have a weekly update. So they didn't do a daily summary except for in the Kursk front. So that's what it is. Over at the Voronezh front, we have fighting reported at Novomlinsk and Yampolivka, according to Rybar, the Russian source mentioning about the Russians expanding their control around Novomlinsk and Yampolivka, but there's no mapping to back it up, so we do not know what is the expansion of the controlled ground. So we move on away from Voronezh front. Over at the Kupiansk, we do not have anything. We move on to the Borova front. At the Borova front, Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported these various attacks over at Zarizove, Lozova, Kopanki, as well as Novoyekhovka. So that's all from Borova front. We move further south. Over in the Makiivka region, fighting is being reported at Novolyubivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, whereas geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting hit by FPV drone. This is M113 of Makiivka, and this is a self-propelled artillery getting hit north of Novomykhailivka. So there is definitely some operations around here with Ukrainian forces definitely clearly present in the region, trying to block off Russian potential offensive in this sector. To move further south to the Liman front, there is frontline changes over at Yampolivka. Fighting is reported in this region by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Well, we have frontline changes. Geolocation of Russian forces in the center or northern center of Yampolivka, confirming Russian advance from Terny, and the Ukrainian mapping considered that the entire forest or gully region southeast of Terny is now fully under Russian control. So this is the major update in this sector. This is pretty big in terms of distance. I think it's around 2 kilometers. Going south is around 1.5 kilometers. So the Russians are still expanding their control around here, and pressure is building up for the Ukrainians here. The logistics here is getting very, very complicated. So that's all from the Liman front. At the Siversk front, we have the Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioning about the fighting at Bilohorivka and Verkhovokanyamsky. Geolocation of self-propelled artillery getting hit by FPV drones. This is getting very common. I'm not sure how much artillery the Ukrainians still have left, but yeah, definitely they are under pressure, and they doesn't seem to have the countermeasures. And also there's seemingly a severe lack of Ukrainian videos, or at least geolocation based on their videos of attacks on Russian vehicles or artillery systems. I know there is, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot. But maybe it's because of my sources. I'm not sure. But let's see how this goes. Over the Bakhmut front, we have fighting reported at Chasivya, Stupovsky, and Peteshne. There is some slight frontline changes of Stupovsky, where the Ukrainian mapping Deep State UA shows that the Russian forces have advanced a little bit in this eastern part of Stupovsky. So that's all from this area. And we move on to Torex. At Torex, some major news. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, they announced the capture of Druzhba. And not just that, they also announced the capture of Torex. So according to the Russian Defense Ministry, they say that they have so-called liberated Zhezint, which is Torex. This is pretty much in line with DPA's mapping, because Torex, according to DPA mapping, is pretty much already captured by the Russian forces, more or less there. And so the Russian Defense Ministry announced this. However, this is not acknowledged by the Ukrainian side just yet. Deep State U and Ukrainian Defense Ministry continue to report fighting at Torex, as Andriivka mentioned about the fighting at Krimsky. Because Ryba say that the Russian Defense Ministry, despite the announcement of capture of Krimsky, they don't agree with that analysis. Same thing, Ryba actually don't agree with the analysis of Druzhba being captured. But that's what it is. So fighting is still ongoing at Krimsky, and Ukrainian Defense Ministry and Ukrainian side still say that the Russians are still fighting urban warfare in Torex, whereas the Russian Defense Ministry announced that they is fully captured. So let's see. Torex, Druzhba. So let's see how this continue to play out. Very, very interesting parallel universe. But based on our geolocations and mapping changes, yeah, Torex should be under Russian control right now. We move further on to the Pokrov front. At the Minokhrad sector, we have fighting reported over at Yampolivka and Promin. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's report, they also mentioned Zeleny Pole and Tarasivka. I actually missed this in the northern flank. Tarasivka and Zeleny Pole was mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And over in the Pokrov sector, there is fighting reported over at Novo-Alexandrivka. Geolocation of Russian forces at Novo-Vasilivka was noted in the south of it, confirming the Russians' presence in that area. And further south in the southern flank, there is only fighting reported at Andriivka. So the lack of Russian reporting thus shows that you can see that there is a lot lesser fighting reports, because all we have so much is because it's a combination of both sides, and we can actually get a bigger picture. But without the Russian Defense Ministry's report, it does look very watered down. Over in the Andriivka front, fighting is reported at Andriivka, Dashne, and Constantinople. There is major update at Andriivka. According to the Ukrainian mapping, they map this boot has now evolved into something like a snake. I'm not sure. The Russian forces, according to the Ukrainian mapping, have advanced in the center of Andriivka, somehow in a very linear way, very weird. As if the Russian forces also only attack with one squadron, with one squad, and yeah. But with this essentially cut off the road towards Constantinople. So the road now is unusable because they have fire control over the other only small road leading to the highway to Constantinople. So the Russians have now basically taken all of these grounds. But clearly, of course, this is a code mapping. This doesn't make any sense at all. So the actual, I would imagine the actual mapping of Andriivka of Russian control is like this. Tentatively, it should be like this, with Russian forces taking all of these areas already, just that the Ukrainians refuse to acknowledge. I think, yeah, if not, if the Russian lines is indeed so short, the Ukrainians could have already cut it off with a pincer and encircle it and destroy it. Like, they could have done this already. The fact that they did not and unable to just shows that this is not the reality. So that's what it is. So Andriivka is now on the verge of capture, I would say. I think in another week, the Russians are likely to continue to push on. And then you're going to see the Ukrainian mapping suddenly announce the fall of Andriivka. Like from this very minimalist mapping to suddenly Andriivka is gone. And it's gone. So that's what it is. So we move on to the Velika Novosibirsk front. There's nothing being reported here. Zaporizhzhia front, also there is nothing being reported. And we move to the Kherson front. And nothing is reported. So that's it. So this is the summary for the day of 1080 for the 7th of February. Do press the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next update.